good to see you. Been a while.
It seems a long while, doesn't it? Since
It's
those
a
heady days
life.
of Cricklewood. Cricklewood seems to come in my mind.
Yeah,
North London.
it's funny you say that. As I was talking with Nick the other day, and we were reminiscing about the house in Cricklewood, where you had the keyboards and the drums set up in the kitchen, and I was a regular visitor, I think, back then, right?
Yeah, it. Yes, actually, I was still in, I think, Kilburn. There was another dwelling, but we'd set up the gear in the place that Nick and Steve were at in Cricklewood, and we used to use it as a writing place, and then a little bit of recording, but minimal, really, just demoing stuff with the
Well,
JP8.
yeah, yeah. Actually, interesting you mentioned the JP8 because that sends me off on another tangent with this new Classics album. As vinyl has made a comeback, I had to go out and buy a record player. And so then I went hunting in my garage to see if I had any vinyl record. And I came across a 12-inch single. It was by a duo called Deluxe A, I think. And
Wow.
I was the producer and you were the keyboard player on it. You remember that?
It does ring a bell for sure. Was it Utopia? No, we didn't do it there. I can't remember actually. Where did we?
I
Yeah,
don't remember the studio either, but
no.
I think we did another one as well, which was for an Indian duo called Hassan, who they were enormous in India. They'd sold millions of albums and they wanted to do an English version. But the one thing that I think is worth recognizing is that back in those days, we had to create the sounds, didn't we? And these days, all you have to do is you just select it.
So yeah, it was different in them days, Sal.
So I just wanted for a moment to go back to the Cricklewood house and
Yeah.
the early Kajagoogoo because one of the things I kind of reminisced with Nick recently was I remember when you guys presented me with the first single, Too Shy, before it was released. And I was kind of shocked because on the back there, I said it looked like the Bay City Rollers. And I knew you guys were like into serious music and all that. So, with a reflection over the years, do you have any kind of regrets about being marketed like kind of boy band instead of a serious musical band?
I think I know the clothing to which you refer, and I certainly was one of the contributors. In that shot, I put on this kind of spotted, I don't know, green and white thing. We've all done things, haven't we, that we look back on and we're proud of, and some things we kind of think, well, I could have done that better. And yeah, I mean, I think we would have, certainly for me, tried to create, less of a sort of image that was for the, those sort of that demographic. But it all comes with age, doesn't it? Really, because then you look at the subsequent second album, third album that we did, the lesser known ones, and I get it. We're known for one major song, really, to a large degree, and that I'm very grateful for that, actually. But we did have two other sort of significant recordings, I believe, and we were moving into a more, trying to gain a more credible, if you like, market. And so, yes, I perhaps do things differently in hindsight. But as I say, it was a success for us at the time that has not stopped going. I mean, so in terms of today, yeah, it's still something that opens certain doors for me, which is great.
So, what would have been your personal influences back in those days?
I think at the time of writing in what was 1983, around that area 82, 83, I was, it was Talking Heads, it was the Police album Synchronicity, I was listening to that a lot, and Bowie was at that time. I remember the Went to see him in Milton Keynes soon after, about 83, 84. Yeah, it was really that kind of stuff, I guess. There was also the electronic side of genre. I mean, quite a bit more poppy, but Kraftwerk, Devo. I mean, Devo was a bit earlier on. It was, I mean, that was more of a, I think, more of an influence for the band. You know, when Nick and Steve, you know, those in the band, they were very influenced by Devo. Very unusual themes. You know, something that would be a little off the wall. So it was that kind of stuff. Bill Nelson from Red Noise, that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's all
So,
coming flooding back, Sal. You've opened up a Pandora's box.
well, once every 40 years, you know, it's good to kind of remember things, make sure we still can.
Indeed, yes.
It's funny you say you've been 20 years in Northern Ireland, but you're still speaking with a strong Milton Keynes accent. I, I've been 24 years in America now, and they think I sound very, very English always. And so
Excellent.
yeah, I guess we keep a little bit of where we came from, right?
Absolutely. My
But
children, I've got six kids, three
children, wow,
born.
congratulations. So how did you end up in Northern Ireland?
It was through I married a lady from North Belfast.
You fell in love, and love brought you there.
Indeed, one of the not an unusual tale, and that's what happened. Actually, to begin with, the my brother moved here, and my brother is still a percussionist. He was with the Ulster Orchestra. It used to be called the Northern Ireland Orchestra. He was lead percussionist there, and he came out of college, moved over here, and I then ended up marrying his nanny, to put it bluntly.
Well, that's an unusual connection, isn't it? Yeah, it's good to hear. I always like an unusual story.
Yes,
Uh,
indeed.
so you graciously listened to the new Classix Nouveaux album, and you sent me a whole bunch of comments very quickly. And so, as all the fans still have another couple of months to wait before they can hear it, I wondered if you wanted to tell them something about it.
Well, yes, indeed, I'd love to. I think probably it's like you know what it's like. You have windows of opportunity to do things, and I had that to listen straight away to your album. But I've not. I must confess, I've not really had time to further dissect. And but let me just go on what I sent the first. You know, my initial responses, and I found it very. For me, very current, very relevant piece in different ways. I think that there's, firstly, people can enjoy, I think, a very well recorded and produced piece of work. It's got a very clean and powerful sound. I thought you did a very good job in getting that. If you produced it yourself, fantastic. And so. Did you get some? Was it your own production there, Sal? Battle Cry.
You know, like that we talked about back in the day when you were playing, I was producing other artists. So over about 40 years, I've probably got a bit better, really.
Yeah, and it comes through. It's got a and quite a variety of you know, putting a collection of songs together is it creates a bit of a conundrum in a sense that, and I found this with the one I did back in 2020, was to give it some uniformity, some standard, some kind of layer that is a collective piece of work that is not too different. You know, you can go from one song to another, that sometimes albums don't hang together. This does very much so, but also has, you know, kept that individuality of the songs. And there's some powerful stuff in there. Now, do forgive me, you know, I haven't got the titles off pat for Battle Cry, but you know, Now I know that I know that this is the listeners of this broadcast are, perhaps not so familiar with this particular point, but I would say that there's some songs in the album that I think speak to what's coming. I think we're looking at the world events, and we're seeing things, aren't we, that have never happened before, and quite dramatic. So I think what you've done here for me, it's a statement about that, about the future. And we all have our own kind of take on things, but for me, the album, jumped out to say, look, you need to listen to this, take a listen, and it's musically very very strong. I'm into a very I'm into different sorts of music, but the electronic synthesizer type of genre, very much so. I love that. I love the tightness of how that works, and it's very powerful. And then you do a different shade. There's shades. There's a kind of an acoustic, more of an acoustic sounding track, and I like that too. So as you can see, I'm sort of feeling my way a bit here on what I I listened. So I'm certainly going to be listening to it a bit more, and I could perhaps be more succinct. But I would recommend people, you need to listen to this. It's a very it's a very worthwhile investment of
Well, I
time.
think it's interesting you pick up on the message in the songs because uh, some of our fans, they're going back to our songs way back in the day and saying there are things that apply today. They come across as almost prophetic. And I think that the typical thing in pop music, obviously, is writing about love or broken hearts or something like that. Uh, I believe Adele became a superstar by talking about broken relationships or something like that. Um, but some of us have never really wanted to take that approach. And so when you're trying to put in a song a kind of observation sometimes about the culture, or like you refer to,
Yeah.
even something about the future, then
Hmm.
people maybe can find more in that long term. Um, yeah.
Absolutely. Do you not find? I mean, my attention span is very low for songs that speak really of Now there's some very poignant love songs, okay, for sure. But for me in songwriting, I find sometimes it's a little bit of an easy way out. It's a little easy route, and you hear it in pop. Yeah, I mean, crikey, I'm listening to some of the songs that my daughters, my youngest is 22, my eldest 30, twins are 37. But they cover many genres, but that boy girl love relationship thing, it doesn't hold a lot of gravitas to me.
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the other thing, um, bearing in mind that we've lived a long life by this point, but our fans have grown up with us. And so back in the day, we could have been speaking to people who were teenagers or 20 years old. And now we're talking about people who are 50, 60 years old. And so inevitably, they want to hear something, or they should want to hear something a bit more, seriousness. And plus, we do have things to share with them, obviously, in a song, if that's our craft, that we would not have had without the life's experience.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. I remember when we did a small reunion tour with Kajagoogoo back in, I don't know, 2009, something like that. These were 13 to 16-year-old girls that were sort of 20, 30 years later on, and they were very enthusiastic. They were, still. It was a great experience. So, but it was different. Clearly, life's experience. You've moved into you kind of knowing who you are by that stage, or maybe not. I mean, you're on the journey still. I mean, I'm 63 and I'm still finding exactly who I am and who I'm meant to be, what I'm meant to do.
Well, we've discovered that life is not over at 60 anymore. There was a time when it seemed like it was, but today it certainly isn't.
Yeah, and I mean the Stones are out, and you look at. I mean, it's quite amazing, isn't it? I also met a singer back in, I think it was about 86, 87. A lady called Helen Shapiro, and she was doing a sort of jazz gospel tour. I got linked up, started playing the guitar with her actually. So I've done guitar for.
Let me come in there for a moment because a lot of people might just be a bit younger and not know who Helen Shapiro is, but people older than us, she was like the big pop star in England, wasn't she? You know,
That's
she
right.
was
Yeah, she was a
probably
child. Mm.
probably her and Dusty Springfield really were the sort of big early female pop stars in England. And so I mentioned her name yesterday to somebody again who's a generation older than us. Oh, Helen Shapiro, yeah, absolutely. Walking Back to Happiness.
Walking back to happiness, I shared with
you played with her and you got introduced to the Messianic movement. Is that correct to call it that way?
Yes, I think it's a good overall description, and it can get a little confusing. You've heard may have you hear a term called Hebrew roots or Messianic roots, but in essence, the Helen. I mean, as you said, Helen was a child star. She was 14 at the time when she had some very big hits, and around the time of the Beatles, it was early 60s. But her journey then, she is a Jew, and Messianic really means Mashiach. It's a Messiah, which is the English word is transliterated as Christ. So a Messianic Jew is a Jewish person that has found Christ, although they don't use the term Christ.
First of all, I want to thank you for doing this. And just kind of a final question. Any sort of still hopes, aspirations for the future, things you haven't kind of realized yet that in the autumn of your life you might do?
I like your terminology there, Sal. Well, actually, I'm planning, God willing, to live a good while longer. But tomorrow is an important day. It's called the Feast of Trumpets, right? It's Yom Teruah, and what does the future hold? But in the time, I think it's building for the future, because my belief is that you know there's an eternal aspect to this. So whatever we do now is not in waste. It's not just short term. I'd like to, in this earthly life here and now, I'd like to actually do some kind of movie, some kind of significant film production. That's one thing I want to do now. I mean, it's way out there because of what's needed budget wise and all the resources. But that's one thing. I want to do some more recording as well, my own recording. Yeah, those two things maybe.
Well, great. So thanks again for the chat. I hope we meet again in person one of these
That'd be
days.
great. Thank you,
And
sir, for inviting me.
maybe we'll even end up doing some kind of music together again one day.
Yeah, I'd enjoy that too, for sure.